I yield back.
Gentleman's time to expire.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that the ATF Director article dated 4/25/2023 be placed into the record.
Without objection. Gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, are you an expert in firearms?
If you're referring to the statement I made, there was a member who was a veteran. I respect very much people's service to our military, who said that he had been an expert. I told him I might not be an expert to the same extent he is, and I'm certainly not an expert to the same extent that people who work for decades at ATF as firearms experts who examine the mechanics, velocity speeds,
okay, I'll take that as I'm not an expert at some level. Are you an expert on tobacco?
I spent my career as a federal prosecutor putting gang members, violent criminals, cartel cases.
No, I appreciate that.
That's my background.
Yeah. So I want to get the yes or no's. Try to make it quick. I'm not expecting a yes, to be honest. You're not an expert on tobacco. You're not an expert on guns. Are you an expert on explosives?
I have prosecuted cases involving the attempted terroristic bombing of a bridge in Ohio, near Cleveland, where you're from. I have dealt with the firebombing of the Mansfield, Ohio.
Do you know what
courthouse.
PETN is?
I'm sorry?
You know what PETN is?
I don't hold myself out as a technical expert in every aspect of firearms.
Have you worked
I'm an expert in dealing with violent crime.
So you know what a prosecutor knows. You have no expertise specifically in what the men and women of the ATF in various stages are experts on. Is that correct?
Respectfully, ATF is a law enforcement agency. I have worked with ATF and law enforcement agencies, including police, my whole career.
I'm trying not to get frustrated over not getting an answer to yes or no, so let's move on. During your earlier testimony, you just said that that you look at behavior to decide about rulemaking. Is that correct? That's what I heard.
What we look at is we look at the entire...
Okay, I have very limited time, and I only ask for the, you can expand afterwards, but a yes or no. You said you looked at behavior.
I don't recall the exact words. What we look at is we look at the laws that Congress passes and the public safety threats facing America.
Okay, so as you look at behavior, which the record will show you were saying, does the Second Amendment, the Constitution, forgetting about statute, because you can forget about statute, Constitution clearly trumps statutes. The Constitution has a right to keep and bear arms. Does behavior change the interpretation of the Second Amendment, in your opinion as an attorney?
I think the Supreme Court has ruled, and more than once, that the right to keep and bear arms is an individual right possessed by Americans.
So we have a right to keep and bear arms. You've spent a lot of time talking about various things. Today we're talking about the brace at some length, I suspect. Does the brace increase the accuracy of a pistol, in your opinion, to the extent that you know?
Congress said...
No, don't answer. No, excuse me. I have limited time, and I insist on your answering the questions I ask, or don't waste any of our time. To the extent that you know enough to have proposed a rule that bans or registers braces, does a brace increase the accuracy of a pistol?
My understanding is that Congress determined that the ability to shoulder short-barreled rifles made them, quote, unusually dangerous.
You're not? Okay, unusually dangerous because it increases the accuracy.
Unusually dangerous because Congress said
so let's
it was
understand something. I appreciate you telling me what our body does, but you have two types of weapon, a pistol and a rifle. A rifle is more accurate than a pistol because it is better braced, correct?
Shouldered, I believe that Congress determined that when weapons could be shouldered and also concealed, that they were unusually dangerous.
Okay, so you're not answering any of the questions, but I'll put one more statement out there. Rifles are in, and look, I'm an EOD tech by training. I know more about explosives than I do about firearms, so we're just going to go through this. Having been a sharpshooter in the military, having been qualified, I know that my .45 is not as accurate when fired as a rifle. But nowhere in the Constitution does it say that the accuracy of a weapon somehow changes the category for purposes of the Second Amendment. By your saying that a brace is in fact going to limit the ability of somebody to have it, what you are clearly doing is you are making decisions based on your interpretation of behavior and risk and not based on the Constitution. So we look forward to additional dialogue with you. I would appreciate in the future that you really do consider whether or not a yes or no should be answered first before you go on with what Congress has passed. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Johnson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act is a law that provides important immunity to manufacturers and sellers of firearms from being liable when people misuse their products. There have been numerous instances, whether intentional or unintentional, of Biden administration officials and anti-gun advocates, and even the president himself, mischaracterizing that immunity provision that's contained in the statute. And I think the public would benefit from our setting the record straight on the issue. So, Mr. Dettelbach, as the director of ATF, do you agree with President Biden that this law's broad immunity means blanket immunity, and that gun manufacturers are the only industry in America exempted from being sued by the public?
Again, I think the president has given numerous different times he's talked about this provision. Again, as ATF director, what Congress passes is what we deal with, and we don't do civil litigation in that sense.
So
that's not under our.
If that's true, and you're going to do what Congress says, then obviously you don't agree with the president. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but that's what that means.
I think the president has called on Congress to act. And what I'm saying is,
just answer this question.
I take what comes
As you interpret the statute, I assume you're familiar with the statute.
I'm familiar with the statute, but ATF doesn't do civil litigation liability
I know
in that
that.
sense. It's not.
Yes, sir, I know, but you're the director of ATF. You're familiar, for example, that vaccine manufacturers have some liability exemption for their COVID vaccines, right?
I actually am not familiar with vaccine law.
Well, okay, most Americans are. Big tech companies are exempt from liability due to Section 230. You have any familiarity with that?
I've obviously, as somebody who reads the news, I know about that.
The point is the president has grossly overstated what this statute does. And since you're not familiar with the statute, apparently, let me tell you that some of the exemptions, the limited exemptions, are negligence, knowingly selling to somebody who's not allowed to have a firearm, knowingly making false records, that kind of thing. It is not a blanket immunity, and we need you to be clear about that because the president, intentionally or unintentionally, is misleading the public on it. Let me move to something else. The stabilizing brace rule, as finalized this year, is about set to go into effect in the 1st of June. There's been some discussion about it this morning, but I think most of the American people are not yet aware because the mainstream media is not covering this issue. But here's the facts. Due to ATF's unilateral and unconstitutional action, okay, if you own a stabilizing brace, you're required to register it with ATF, turn it in or destroy it by May 31st, or you're going to face criminal penalties. Mr. Dettelbach, as an attorney, I'm assuming you know what a reliance interest is, right? Familiar with the term?
I'm not sure I'm in agreement with your characterization.
Do you know the term reliance interest? I'm not playing games here.
I'm not trying to either. I'm trying to be respectful. I'm in disagreement with your summary of what the.
I haven't summarized it yet. I'm asking you if you know the term.
About what you said, I'm sorry. About
what is a reliance interest? You were a federal prosecutor. What's a reliance interest?
Well, we don't use it in federal prosecution, but from being a lawyer, reliance generally, I think from my days in contracts and as a civil litigator, refers to the idea that in contract law, when somebody relies to their detriment on certain kinds of matters, that they have some legal claims that they might not otherwise have.
Excellent. It's not just confined to contract law, but as a lawyer and knowing that definition, knowing the concept, I mean, does it concern you that for years, law-abiding Americans relied on the ATF's guidance in purchasing stabilizing braces, and now due to a regulation, not a law passed by Congress, but a regulation, millions of them are going to suddenly become felons?
First of all, the law doesn't either ban anything, nor does the rule apply to all stabilizing braces. The rule under the National Firearms Act helps define and clarify what the characteristics of a firearm that would be a short-barreled rifle.
With your clarification,
inconsistency.
Is it true or not that millions of Americans will be defined as felons after May 31 if they don't follow this new regulation? True or not?
I assume that people are going to either detach the weapons, follow the things.
If they
that the
don't follow the
government-
regulation, they'll be a felon, right? You're a former federal prosecutor.
Yeah, and I will tell you that that federal prosecutions do not happen with respect to law-abiding people who can't have a criminal intent
Okay,
established. That is not a priority.
Okay, here's the problem we have.
But-
Here's the problem we have, okay? You ran for Ohio Attorney General in 2018. Your platform included gun control. We know where you stand, right? As recently as 10 minutes ago, Ms. Jackson-Lee, you couldn't answer or define what a so-called assault weapon is. You continue to not be able to do that or refuse to do it. It's clear that you came to ATF with an agenda, I believe, to infringe upon good law-abiding Americans' rights. And you're going to turn them into criminals with this regulation, and you seem to have no remorse about it. I'm out of time, and I yield back.
With respect to,
Gentleman yields.
I didn't ask you a question.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman yields back. The other Mr. Johnson from Georgia is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.